What's up guys, Void here from View the Void, and today I'm bringing you an extremely important video whether you're a new player or a competitive player. With the recent release of the level 320 patch within Lineage 2 Revolution, every single class now has access to brand new abilities called Awakening abilities, which present as both active skills and passive skills. Why is this such a big deal? This is a huge deal because now with the release of these new Awakening abilities, the entire game has completely changed. Now, classes like healers who were previously swept underneath the rug by most clans are now some of the most highly desirable and sought after classes in the entire game simply by virtue of possessing these new Awakening abilities. I was so excited when all of these abilities released that I wanted to know what all of them did so that I could be prepared and know what I'm going up against in the field. So I began to do some research and I actually found that it was pretty difficult to find information on all of them with specifics and other things that I wanted to know about each class. And after searching for about 97 hours to no avail, I did. I messaged all the top players across all the different servers, and I basically just pestered them into submission until they agreed to send me detailed screenshots on their Awakening abilities. So that's what this guide's going to be. It's going to be your full disclosure, everything you ever wanted to know about every single one of the new Awakening abilities, all here in one place for your convenience. And what you're going to get with this guide is you're going to see actually everything. You're going to see the animations, the time durations, the percentages, and the ability activation conditions. My hope is that the information in this video will be helpful to you whether you're a new player or a competitive player, whether you're trying to make a decision as to which class you want to choose from the beginning of the game, or if you're a competitive player, how to properly deal with all of the new threats found within Lineage 2 Revolution in the PvP field. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and leave timestamps in the description below so that if you end up revisiting this video for studying purposes, you'll be able to jump right to the classes that you want to see. Additionally, I will leave a link to my Twitch stream in the bottom of the description box so that if you wanted to follow me and maybe ask me more questions or just follow my competitive gameplay, you can certainly do that as well. And now that that's all been said, let's get right into it. First one is going to be the Phoenix Knight, which is the awakened version of the Paladin. The Phoenix Knight gains access to Shield of Faith, which imbues self with HP recovery and damage reduction buffs using Holy Light, grants party members HP recovery and a powerful shield to reduce the damage they receive, and a portion of the damage received is inflicted on self. Here's what the abilities do. For Shield of Faith, it recovers HP on self by 61,000. The damage decreases 15% for 20 seconds. Party members' HP recovery goes up by 26,000. It absorbs 50% of damage received by party members for 20 seconds, and less damage, of course, is absorbed depending on the number of party members with the buff. For the passive ability, Final Fortress, it increases defense for a duration of time when HP falls below a certain range. Specifically, if your HP falls below 50%, your defense will increase by 56,000, and this ability lasts for 15 seconds. The second class is the Dreadnought, which is the awakened version of the Warlord. Now the Dreadnought gains access to Berserker, which causes you to briefly go berserk, increasing attack, crit rate, and the number of basic attack targets, but decreasing defense. Here are the specifics. For Berserker, your simultaneous targets increases by 2 targets, your P attack increases by 59,000, your crit rate goes up by 35%, and your P defense is reduced by 13,000. This ability lasts for 20 seconds. And for the passive ability, Final Frenzy, it increases your attack speed and P attack for a duration of time when your HP falls below a certain range, and invincibility is granted for a brief duration. This ability is activated if your HP falls below 50%, and it increases your P attack by 19,000, it increases your attack speed by 10%, and it causes you to be invincible for 1 second. This passive ability is active for 10 seconds upon activation. The next class that we're going to look at is the Adventurer, which is the awakened version of the Treasure Hunter. The Adventurer gains access to Shadow Cloak, which increases evasion rate, speed, attack speed, basic attack range, and crit rate by going stealth. Skills cannot be used while in stealth, and bonus damage on a basic attack will deactivate stealth. Specifically, Shadow Cloak increases your evasion rate by 100%, increases your speed by 50%, your attack speed increases by 40%, your basic attack damage goes up by 600%, and basic attack range increases by 100%. It says crit rate, I'm not quite sure what that means, but the duration lasts for 8 seconds total. The passive ability is Exciting Adventure, which increases speed, attack speed, and crit rate at a set chance when evasion occurs. It doesn't say what that proc chance is, but when it does activate, your speed will be increased by 15%, your attack speed will be increased by 10%, and your crit rate will be increased by 11,000. The duration for this passive ability is 5 seconds. Next, we'll be looking at the Sagittarius, which is the awakened version of the Hawkeye. The Sagittarius gains access to an ability called Lightning Arrow. Lightning Arrow fires an electrified arrow. If an arrow hits the enemy, it explodes, inflicting damage and electrifying them, creating a magnetic field that electrocutes nearby enemies. Lightning Arrow causes 408% of your attack plus 147,000. Creates a force field and decreases speed of targets by 200%, and it lasts for 4.5 seconds. That's essentially a snare. The passive ability Deadeye Stance increases damage to targets that have had their speed reduced or are affected by bleed. Your attack increases by 15% against enemies affected by bleed. Additionally, your attack is increased by 15% against enemies that are affected by movement impairing effects. The next class we're going to look at is the Archmage, which is the awakened version of the Sorcerer. The Archmage gains access to Prominence, which summons a fireball that damages enemies and stuns them. After a duration of time, the fireball can be detonated to inflict even more bonus damage. Increased defense and stun immunity is granted during casting, but other actions cannot be taken. Prominence deals 260% of attack plus 87,000 after 3.5 seconds. Damages 520% of attack plus 174,000. Targets are stunned for 3.5 seconds and then they're knocked down for 2 seconds. Debuff immunity is for 3.5 seconds. Your defense increases by 50% and you are incapacitated, which means that you cannot perform any other actions while you're channeling this ability. For the passive ability Arcane Stockpile, it gains stacks every time a skill is used. When 4 stacks are gained, the next offensive normal skill is imbued with increased damage. This passive ability activates upon the 4th stack. Your basic attack skill damage increases by 100%, and the stack duration lasts for 40 seconds. Okay, so the next class we're going to look at is the Cardinal, which is the awakened version of the Bishop. The Cardinal gains access to Harmonized Life, which recovers own HP immediately and recovers the HP of allies who need healing. A barrier is bestowed on all party members, and damage taken from rare skills is decreased as long as the barrier is active. Harmonized Life recovers 3% of the cumulative average HP ratio for party members whose HP ratios are lower than the average. A shield that absorbs 60,000 damage is deployed for 10 seconds, and your self-recovery rate is set to recovers, which means you begin recovering HP. For the passive ability Lucky Major Heal, it bestows a barrier to party members when Major Heal is used. When Major Heal is used, you are given a shield that absorbs 17,000 damage, which is deployed for 7 seconds. And now moving on to the Elf class, we will begin with Ava's Templar, which is the awakened version of the Temple Knight. Ava's Templar gains access to Ava's Will, which increases evasion rate, debuff resistance, and decreases damage received by allies in the summoned area, and also removes all debuffs from allies within the cast range. Can be cast while stunned. Ava's Will immediately removes debuffs from self and party members. Your evasion rate is increased by 30%. Your damage taken is reduced by 15%. Your debuff resistance is increased by 20%. And this ability can be cast even while you're stunned. The duration for Ava's Will is 15 seconds. And for the passive ability Sixth Sense, it increases evasion for a duration of time when HP falls below a certain range. This ability activates when your HP falls below 50%. Your evasion rate is increased by 15%. Your evasion is increased by 7,000, and this passive ability lasts for 15 seconds. Moving along, we will look at the Sword Muse, which is the awakened version of the Swordsinger. The Sword Muse gains access to Song of Champions. It increases self and allies attack and decreases all skill cooldowns, excluding ultimate skills or awakening abilities. Song of Champions decreases your own skill cooldowns by 50%, party members' skill cooldowns are reduced by 30%, and everyone's attack is increased by 21%. The duration for Song of Champions is 40 seconds. And for the passive ability Song of Assault, your P attack increases each time a skill is used. When a skill is used, it increases your P attack by 3,000, and it stacks up to a maximum of 10 times. The duration for Song of Assault is 10 seconds. The Windrider, which is the awakened version of the Planeswalker, they now gain access to Combo Splinter. Spends the accumulated combo count to slash one enemy. The The enemy hit becomes incapacitated for 2 seconds and receives massive damage. Damage is increased based on the combo count. Combo Splinter does 395% plus 150,000 of attack. It increases to a max of 250% based on combo counts spent. Max combo count is 150. Incapacitates targets for 2 seconds. For the passive ability Combo Keeper, a combo count is added when attacking an enemy using an attack skill, and bonus damage increases depending on the count. For Combo Keeper, your combo increases by 30 whenever a skill is used. Damage is increased continuously based on your combo count. This means that your damage actually goes up by 5% for every 50 combo points. You can have a total of 150 combo points maximum for this ability, which would result in a 15% increase in damage for as long as this passive is active. Next up, we have the Moonlight Sentinel, which is the awakened version of the Silver Ranger. The Moonlight Sentinel gains access to Spirit of Moonlight basic attack. Basic attack settings when Spirit of Moonlight is used. For Spirit of Moonlight, it decreases your normal attack targets to 1. If attacking with a normal attack, attack 3 consecutive times. Damage is 63% plus 10,000, and it ends after 15 successful attacks. Otherwise, the duration for this ability is 20 seconds. And for the passive ability, Spirit of Critical Shots, it gains stacks for every successful skill. Crit rate and basic attack damage increases on the 9th stack. Stacks reset after the effect is consumed. Spirit of Critical Shots activates upon the 9th stack. Your normal attack damage increases by 10,000. I'm not sure what this means, but it says most effective crit rate applied. Stack duration is 10 seconds. Next up, we will be looking at the Mystic Muse, which is the awakened version of the Spellsinger. The Mystic Muse gains access to an ability called Starfall, which summons meteors nearby. Summoned meteors will fall on random areas, inflicting damage and reducing speed. For Starfall, when using skills, decrease speed of nearby enemies by 15 for 3 seconds. Damage, replace 1, plus 60,000 of attack every 10 attacks. Decrease target speed by 20% for 3 seconds. And for the passive ability Frost Armor, it has a chance to decrease target's attack when attacking an enemy that is movement impaired. Frost Armor activates at a 50% chance when attacking an enemy affected by movement impairing effects. Your target's attack will be reduced by 18%, and the duration for this ability is 10 seconds. And finally, for the elves, we will be looking at Ava Saint, which is the awakened version of the Elder. Ava Saint gains access to an ability called Resurrection, which revives dead allies by imbuing them with holy power, and resets all skill cooldowns excluding ultimate skills or awakening abilities. It resets your own normal skill cooldowns and grants barriers to all allies. Resurrection revives with 30% of max HP, resets cooldowns of resurrected party members excluding ultimate skills or awakening abilities. It causes them to be invincible for 3 seconds and is removed if an attack is made. Normal skill cooldowns are all reset. For the passive ability, Restoration Barrier, it bestows a barrier to party members when Restoration is used. So when Restoration is used, a shield is deployed which absorbs 16,000 damage for up to 7 seconds. Moving on to the Dark Elf class, the first one is the Chilean Templar, which is the awakened version of the Chilean Knight. The Chilean Templar gains access to an ability called Spirit of Chilean, which increases your own attack and your party members' attack, as well as their attack speed and HP drain. This ability reduces threats against your party members for a limited time, and also it imbues them with a buff that briefly grants nullification against skills. Spirit of Chilean increases your party's attack by 14,000, increases their attack speed by 15%, their HP drain by 3%, and it defends against all skill attacks for 2 seconds. Additionally, it defends against 1 skill attack for 7 seconds. For the passive ability Barrier of Chilean, it creates a barrier for a short period of time when your HP falls below a certain range. Barrier of Chilean is activated if your HP falls below 30%, and it deploys a shield which absorbs 63,000 damage. This ability's duration is 7 seconds. Next up, we have the Spectral Dancer, which is the awakened version of the Blade Dancer, a very popular class. The Spectral Dancer gains access to Immunity Madness, which increases resist rate, speed, and defense. Defeating an enemy increases the duration. Again, what does that even mean? Immunity Madness increases your abnormal status resist rate by 100%, completely unable to be stunned. Your speed is increased by 10%, your defense is increased by 35,000, Your damage overall reduction is 10%. The duration for this ability is increased by 10 seconds whenever an enemy is defeated, and you can increase the duration on this ability for a maximum of 30 seconds. For the passive ability, Dance of Assault, it has a chance to increase P attack when attacking an enemy with low HP. One normal skill's cooldown will also be reset. This passive ability activates when attacking an enemy with HP under 25%. Your P attack is increased by almost 7,000, and it randomly resets the cooldown of a normal skill on cooldown. The proc rate for this passive ability is 25%. Next up, we have the Ghost Hunter, which is the awakened version of the Abyss Walker. The Ghost Hunter gains access to an ability called Shadow Clone, which copies the shadow of oneself and summons it. The summoned copy receives a portion of current attack and is awarded bonus stats. The duration for Shadow Clone is 10 seconds. It copies the summoner's attack and defense by 30%, increasing CP and ignoring damage. The skill is that it teleports to the first attack target and decreases speed by 25%. Summoned attack is plus 1000. The passive ability Blood Hunter has a chance to decrease the target's defense when attacking enemies. If the target is affected by bleed, bleed status is detonated for bonus damage. Blood Hunter activates when attacking an enemy. It decreases their defense by 11,000. Bleed damage is 500% of bleed damage. The proc rate is 15%, and the duration for this ability Blood Hunter is 5 seconds. Next up, we have the Ghost Sentinel, which is the awakened version of the Phantom Ranger, my personal favorite. The Ghost Sentinel gains access to an ability called Final Death Sting, where 3 rounds of powerful arrows are fired upon the enemy, inflicting massive damage. Additionally, your attack is increased temporarily. Final Death Sting does 272% of your attack plus 121,000 for each projectile. Your attack is increased by almost 20,000 for 15 seconds, and targets hit by 3 arrows have their speed reduced by 30% for 5 seconds. It says attack speed minus 30%. I tested it. This means that the targets who get hit by Final Death Sting also have their attack speed decreased by 30% for 5 seconds. And for the passive ability Grand Phantom Mastery, it increases your accuracy. Also, your P attack increases depending on your accuracy rate. Your accuracy is increased by 7,000, and your P attack increases for every 15% of accuracy. I also tested this, and increasing your accuracy does not increase your P attack. It's actually a stat called accuracy rate, which there is currently no way of increasing in the game at this point in time. Moving on to the Storm Screamer, which is the awakened version of the Spell Howler. The Storm Screamer gains access to Night Summoner, where it summons a Shadow Knight. The summoned Shadow Knight will attack the target the caster is currently targeting and uses a skill that stuns nearby enemies. Now, the description for this ability, Night Summoner, is actually cut off at the bottom, and none of my friends were able to tell me what it says because they can't see it either. Anyway, the duration for Night Summoner is 20 seconds. It copies the summoner's attack and defense by 10%, increasing CP, decreases target speed by 25% when attacking with a basic attack, and it stuns them for 2 seconds when using skills. The summoned HP is 146,000. And for the passive ability Arcane Shield, it has a chance to increase M attack when hit. An Arcane Shield activates, converting a portion of the damage taken to be consumed as mana instead. Arcane Shield has a 15% chance to proc whenever you are hit. If Arcane Shield procs, your M attack goes up by almost 20,000, and 80% of the damage that you take will be taken away from your mana pool instead of your HP pool. And this actually applies to a maximum of 3 attacks. And finally, for the Dark Elves, we have the Chilean Saint, which is the awakened version of the Chilean Elder. The Chilean Saint gains access to an ability called Chilean's Protection, which imbues party members and self with the power to defy death. Yes, glorious. Attack is increased during the buff. Upon receiving fatal damage, you actually become invincible for a short time to immediately recover HP, and a barrier is activated for a brief. That's all it says. For Chilean's Protection, I'll be honest, I have no idea what this means, but during the buff's duration, your attack is increased by replace 0. You become invincible for 1.5 seconds when your HP falls below 100. HP regen. Your HP is restored to 31% of your maximum HP, and a shield will be deployed for 7 seconds, which absorbs 48,000 damage. For the passive ability, Lucky Vampiric Touch, it bestows a barrier to party members when Vampiric Touch is used. When Vampiric Touch is used, it activates a shield which absorbs 16,000 damage, and this shield is created for 7 seconds. Moving on to the Dwarfs, we will start with the Eternal Guardian, which is the awakened version of the Guardian. The Eternal Guardian gains access to Final Secret, which unleashes inner energy and ascends, overpowering enemies. Ascending increases max HP and attack while reducing damage received. Final Secret increases your max HP by 26,000. Your damage decrease rate is 20%, and your damage is increased by 10%. Key attack increases by 18,000, and the duration for Final Secret is 20 seconds. For the passive ability Healing Winds, it recovers HP for a duration of time when HP falls below a certain range. If your HP falls below 30%, your recovery rate will restore by 42,000 for 3 seconds. Moving on to the War Slayer, which is the awakened version of the Slayer. The War Slayer gains access to Infinity Quake. Now, if you're one of the few who was actually fortunate enough to not have your phone explode due to rendering the initial animation of this ability, here's what you can expect to happen. For Infinity Quake, the damage is 181% plus 63,000 of attack for every 7 hits dealt. Targets are also stunned for 0.5 seconds every 1 second, and the duration for Infinity Quake is 7 seconds. For the passive ability, Lucky Rejection, it has a chance to increase defense and damage decrease rate when damage equal to at least 10% of maximum HP is taken. When this class takes 10% or more of their maximum HP, they have a 15% chance to proc Lucky Rejection, which will increase their damage decrease rate by 15% and increase their defense by 14,000. Lucky Rejection, if it procs, lasts for 10 seconds. Next up, we have the Bounty Hunter, which is the awakened version of the Scavenger. The Bounty Hunter gains access to Coin of Maffer. A coin is tossed after nearby enemies are incapacitated for 2.5 seconds. If a silver coin appears, enemies are blinded and damage is inflicted. If a bronze coin appears, enemies are poisoned and silenced. A gold coin will inflict all effects. If the silver coin appears, it will deal 507% plus 148,000 of attack. The person attacked will also have their accuracy rate decreased by 100% for 7 seconds. If the bronze coin appears, the enemy will be poisoned for 5 seconds and silenced for 7 seconds. If the gold coin appears, all of the aforementioned effects will be applied simultaneously. For the passive ability Wild Hunter, damage increases against poison or silenced enemies. And the description reads, attack plus 15% against enemies affected by poison. Additionally, attack plus 15% against enemies affected by silence. I'm assuming that these percentages are additive, meaning that if you get a gold coin, you will do 30% more damage to your opponent. Moving along to the Warsmith, which is the awakened version of the War Ranger. The Warsmith gains access to an ability called Booby Trap. Traps are installed. Installed traps are invisible to enemies and explode if an enemy gets close, stunning them and inflicting damage. Also, installs another trap underneath their feet. For a Booby Trap, damage is 425% plus 119,000 of attack for every 4 hits dealt. Enemies are stunned for 3 seconds. Traps actually last for 15 seconds, and small traps are less effective than normal traps. For the passive ability Hard Target, it decreases speed and defense of the enemy and stuns at a set rate when hit. So this ability activates when hit with a 15% proc chance. If this ability does proc, it will decrease their defense by 24,000 for 5 seconds. It will decrease their speed by 30% for 5 seconds. And additionally, the person that attacked you will also be stunned for 1 second. Next up, we have the Eldritch Wizard, which is the awakened version of the Battle Mage. The Eldritch Wizard has access to an ability called Distortion, which creates a distortion of space that inflicts damage to enemies. A portion of the damage dealt is absorbed, creating a barrier. Enemies attacked have their speed greatly decrease momentarily and recover their speed slowly. For Distortion, it deals 264% plus 93,000 of attack. The shield is 15% plus 37,000 of damage dealt, and this shield is deployed for 7 seconds. Additionally, the speed of the target of this attack is decreased by 100%, and it gains progressive recovery over 8 seconds. For the passive ability Shield of Attack, it increases attack for the duration of the barrier. This Shield of Attack is activated whenever your shield is deployed, and it increases your attack by 14,000. And finally, for the Dwarfs, we have the Master Sage, which is the awakened version of the Sage. The Master Sage gains access to an ability called Healing Totem, which installs a Totem of Recovery. Allies within range of the totem have their HP continuously restored and their defense is increased. For Healing Totem, the recovery rate is 2% plus 7,000 of attack per second. Your defense additionally is increased by 33,000, and the total duration for this healing totem ability is 10 seconds. The passive ability is Divine Protection Barrier, which bestows a barrier to party members when Divine Protection is used. So when Divine Protection is used, a shield which absorbs 17,000 damage will be created for 7 seconds. And moving on to the final set, actually the brand new class of Orcs, we will begin with the Destroyer, which is the awakened version of the Orc Raider. The Destroyer has gained access to an ability called Furious Slasher. It says, receive the power of the Guardian God to increase speed and attack and imbue energy into basic attacks for 10 seconds. Additionally, attack speed is increased for a duration. For Furious Slasher, basic attack gains sword energy for 10 seconds. Each hit in sequence is 131%, 108%, 125%, 132%, and 169% of attack. Additionally, your speed is increased by 15% for 10 seconds, your attack is increased by 5% for 10 seconds, and your attack speed is increased by 15% for 4 seconds. The passive ability is Debuff Protection, which recovers a portion of HP when debuffed, and has a chance to increase defense and attack. So with this passive ability, every time you're debuffed, your HP recovers by 14,000. You also have a 30% chance to increase your defense by 20%. You have a 30% chance to increase your attack by 10%, and if this ability procs, the duration for this ability is 5 seconds. Moving on to the Tyrant, which is the awakened version of the Orc Monk. The Tyrant gains access to Ring of Silence, which seals your own skills for a duration, but increases basic attack damage and attack range, as well as speed. Additionally, it decreases the speed of nearby enemies and silences them. Ring of Silence seals caster skills for 10 seconds, meaning you cannot use anything else other than auto attacks. However, it increases your speed by 30%, it increases your basic attack damage by 100%, and it increases basic attack range. Additionally, it silences enemies in the area and causes nearby enemies' speed to be reduced by 20%. And for the passive ability Cripple, it reads it has a chance to decrease the target speed and attack on a successful hit. So every time you hit an enemy, there is a 10% chance to reduce their speed by 25% for 5 seconds. And also, I believe this is a typo. I think it's supposed to say 10 or 20%, but it says that you can reduce their attack by 0% for 5 seconds. And we made it, guys. Moving on to the final class, the War Crier, which is the awakened version of the Orc Shaman. This, without a doubt, has to be one of my favorite classes. The War Crier gained access to Seal of Fear, which discharges the power of the spirit to inflict damage to nearby enemies and cause fear at the same time. Seal of Fear causes 251% of attack plus 79,000 and fear for 4.5 seconds. This is the biggest deal right here. Look at this passive ability. Chant of Protection. Increases defense of everyone in the party and decreases critical damage received. What does that mean? Simply by virtue of joining a War Crier's party, you can have your defense increase by at least 14,000 and have all critical damage received minus 50%. Not to mention, you also gain Death Whisper from joining a War Crier's party, which increases your critical damage output by 70%. That is insanity. Okay, so now that you've seen all these abilities, how do you actually get them? Well, as I mentioned before, beginning at level 271 is when you can complete the entire quest line. Once you achieve that level, the game will actually auto-queue you onto that quest line, and it will be denoted with a purple frame in the upper left-hand corner. You'll know that you're on the quest line when each quest takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. It's a long and arduous process, but it is certainly worth it. Inevitably, the second question will be, okay, so now that I have the awakening abilities, how do I actually level them up? Do I level them up just like every other ability with skill points? The answer is no. It's actually a bit more complicated than that. What you're actually going to want to level up awakening abilities are going to be items called Lesser Giants Tomes, which look like this. Go to the bottom here. Here we go. Lesser Giants Tome. A tome containing the secrets of the Lesser Giants, used as a material to level up ultimate skills, aka awakening abilities. Now, as of right now, there are only 3 ways that I'm aware of to actually acquire these Lesser Giants Tomes. The first of which is by actually completing the quest line for the awakening ability. They will award you some by default at that point. The second way is by combining something called these Forgotten Tome Fragments. it takes 10 Forgotten Tome fragments to be bound together to make one Lesser Giant's Tome. The way that you acquire these Forgotten Tome fragments is by participating in the 3v3 Honorable Battlefield. Even if you don't do the entire 1 hour event whenever this opens, please at least make sure that you go in and acquire the maximum amount of honor coins for the day. For me, it's 80, so that you can acquire this chest here called the Master League Honor Box, which gives you 50 skill points and 4 Lesser Giant's Tome fragments. And the third way is, you guessed it, through the shop. So if you click on the shop, in the upper right hand corner, special shop, recommended, and scroll all the way to the right, you will see that every week you can purchase up to 3 Lesser Giant's Tomes for 499 blue diamonds apiece. If you have the means to purchase these every week, I would highly recommend it, as these are extremely rare, and this is really the only way I know how to get them in bulk. Have a good day. Level 6. Okay guys, so that's going to do it for the video. I do hope that you enjoyed this video. It took me a long time to acquire all this information and compile it into one video for your convenience. And so if you did find this video helpful and you did like it, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more helpful and informative videos that serve as your guide to the world of Lineage 2 Revolution. Enjoy your day.